Why do people still die from preventable diseases in the richest societies in human history? Why are some communities trapped in poverty for generations? Anthropology has an answer. It's called structural violence. Welcome to Anthropology in 10 or Less. I'm your host, Michael Kilman. Today's topic is structural violence. What is structural violence? Well, as the peasant in Monty Python and the Holy Grail says, the violence is inherent in the system. Help, help, I'm being oppressed. The term, coined by Johann Galton in his 1969 article, Violence, Peace, and Peace Research, says, structural violence are the social circumstances and social structures or institutions that keep individuals from meeting their basic needs. Basically, it's a rigged game. In a 2004 article titled An Anthropology of Structural Violence, medical doctor and anthropologist Paul Farmer says, the concept of structural violence is intended to inform the study of the social machinery of oppression. In other words, structural violence is a starting point for understanding oppressive and unequal structures. Paul Farmer looks at the symptoms of oppression, including poverty, sexism, racism, inequality, lack of access to affordable healthcare, education, and more, and he says, instead of trying to treat the symptoms, we should look deeper to diagnose the cause of the illness, the structure of the cultural, political, and economic systems. At the core of many of our major social issues is economic and political power and the unequal distribution of resources. Remember how we talked about the creation of race being a direct result of elite economic actors trying to divide and conquer the poor in the 17th century? The very concept of race was created as a mechanism of structural violence, a system which continues to disenfranchise people of color on many levels. Paul Farmer's article is ultimately about the lack of access to quality healthcare in Haiti, false perceptions around the AIDS epidemic, and how Haiti, the first nation founded as a result of a successful slave revolt, was purposely made poor by European powers and continues to be at the whim of American and European influence today. The article begins with a story of a young woman named Anite, who meets Farmer on a normal Wednesday morning at one of his clinics he's working at in Haiti. Anite is dying. She has a cancerous tumor so large that Farmer says it has almost completely replaced one of her breasts. This young woman tells Farmer and the crowd watching that she's known about this tumor for a while. She says she's visited 14 different medical clinics for treatment, only to be turned away at each one without more than the briefest of examination. Anite tells Farmer that she simply can't afford the clinics. After a hard week of painful travel on foot, she's finally reached Farmer's clinic for treatment, desperate for help. But it was too late. Farmer's ultimate question in this article is, how did the system get so bad? Why do children die of preventable diseases like cholera? Okay, let's back up here. If you want to understand structural violence, or as Farmer put it, the machinery of oppression, there are two key things to know: hidden systems and the erasure and control of history. First, on the hidden systems. We tend to ignore problems we can't see or don't understand. We may also have an internal list of social justifications for a problem to dismiss the issue. Apathy is one of many tools of power and social control. But it's not just a cold heart that's the problem. Structural violence keeps us busy with distractions like culture wars, endless spectacle, the need to work multiple jobs to survive, or even convincing us to blame ourselves for the problem. Bro, you just gotta manifest that stuff harder. I want to add here that many people don't have much choice. Many people out there are just trying to survive. Not everyone has the means to boycott products or can easily change their situation. Sometimes there are actual laws and policies in place that make it almost impossible to better your situation. In the United States, we're taught to believe that poverty is caused by laziness, bad choices, or bad luck. And so we equate poverty to poor character or moral failings. In anthropology, we sometimes talk about the difference between perceived truth, how we think things are, versus ground truth, how things actually are. Structural violence bends the perceived truth so that few people understand the situation on a ground level. People's lived experience of struggle are often different than we hear about in the news. People everywhere are trying to do their best in difficult circumstances. Then there's the second element of structural violence, the erasure and control of history. You've probably heard the term Orwellian, or at least are familiar with the idea of Big Brother from the famous dystopian novel by George Orwell titled 1984. If you haven't read it, you might want to check out the Resistance Reads podcast, where my friend Matt and I discuss power and resistance through literature. Links in the description. What makes something Orwellian is the manipulation of language and narratives, especially in regards to history or social information. This is a key element to the book 1984. The government of Oceania controls the narrative of every newspaper and book through a constant barrage of propaganda created by the Ministry of Truth. In fact, the main character, Winston, is employed in this department and spends his whole working life editing text to prop up the party he begins to loathe. By limiting or controlling what history or elements of culture people are allowed to learn, you can keep the system going. By changing words to make things sound more pleasant or convoluted, you can change the way people think about the present cultural and political system they inhabit. It's not just governments that do this. In fact, corporate advertising and massive PR campaigns are designed to alter the way you think about something. Consider checking out the book The Big Myth: How American Business Taught Us to Loathe Government and Love the Free Market. It's a book about the history of corporate propaganda. Back to Paul Farmer's article. The history of Haiti has largely been erased. Haiti was an important slave colony for the French at the end of the 18th century. In 1791, a large-scale slave revolt began, what ultimately led to the Haitian independence in 1804. But what came after that independence is ultimately what leads to severe poverty and lack of access to health care that Farmer describes in his 2004 article. After Haiti won independence, France demanded massive reparations for, quote, lost property. That property was formerly enslaved people. Yes, it's as bad as it sounds. France demanded that the now free people of Haiti pay them 150 million in francs for their freedom. Or else what? Or else they would stage a massive trade embargo and cripple Haiti's economy. It didn't take long for the French to convince both the British and the United States to uphold that trade embargo. Why? Because both the United States and Britain relied on slavery for the core elements in their economy, and if they did not quash Haiti, their own slaves might get ideas. It took 122 years to pay off that debt. See the NPR article I linked below for more on that. Much of what we call the Third World today has history surrounding structural violence that we've erased or ignored to justify continued exploitation of these cultures. None of this is an accident. The point of structural violence is to maintain or expand power. And this isn't just history. You can see structural violence today in areas like housing, healthcare, and even in how the justice system handles powerful people. And the case of Jeffrey Epstein is a modern example. It's not just about one terrible individual. His case raises questions about how wealth, influence, and institutions can shape investigations, accountability, and public narratives. A huge part of structural violence is controlling the narratives of the past and the present. Hence, the famous quote by Orwell, "He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past." The erasure and control of history prevents people from even having conversations about difficult issues in the first place. But how do you know if your history has been manipulated? Well, real history is often uncomfortable. There's no culture or nation anywhere that was always the good guy. All of them have done terrible things. History should include a wide variety of perspectives from all sides of the conflict. Anything else is usually propaganda. But there's a reason to be optimistic. All of these problems were created by humans, which also means all of these problems can be solved by humans. The point of understanding structural violence is not to fall into despair, but rather for us to look critically at how our systems run and then find ways within our communities to begin addressing them. Never underestimate the power of a strong community to make change. The first step is understanding the system. That's all for this episode of Anthropology in 10 or Less. And don't forget, if you like this episode, head over to my Substack and subscribe. I host anthropological office hours for paid subscribers. You can also find my books, including Build Better Worlds, An Introduction to Anthropology for Game Designers, Fiction Writers, and Filmmakers, and my fiction work. See you next time.